Welcome to the Cutting Edge Health Preventing Cognitive Decline podcast. I'm Jane Rogers. Welcome back to the Cutting Edge Health Preventing Cognitive Decline podcast. You know, I hate to tell you we need to add something else to our exercise regimen, but I think it may be smart. I just interviewed Chris Ring. He's a PhD from the University of Birmingham in England, and he and his research colleagues have found out that if you add brain endurance training, either before you do your exercise or during it intermittently, like if you do weightlifting and in between your sets, you add brain endurance training, like with an app on your phone, that it really helps your cognition, interestingly, and it also helps you physically as well. I think you'll find what he has to say easy to apply, and I hope you get a lot out of it. I certainly did. My workout is going to change. Dr. Ring, thank you so much for joining us for this podcast. I've been really excited about your research.
Well, thank you, Jane, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to come on and speak with you and share some information with your listeners.
Wonderful. And we're doing a first, at least for me, and that's interviewing someone who is in Tokyo.
Yes, it's the first for me. Well, I tell you, it's not the first time. It's the second time in Tokyo, but it's a great place to be.
Oh, I bet it is. But usually you hail from the University of Birmingham in England.
Yes, University of Birmingham in England. That's right. Yes.
Great. So when I read your research, and it got quite a bit of publicity, I was really excited because I love to work out. But what you're saying your research is finding is you need to add a whole other component before your workout. You need to work your brain out first for 20 minutes and then go to the gym. So can you tell me how you found this, how you designed your research and pull it apart so it motivates all of us to do the brain stuff first?
Absolutely. For about the last 10 years or so, I have been spending a lot of my research and thinking time interested in the topic of mental fatigue and performance in the context of sport and exercise. And the bottom line is that it's now very well established that if you are mentally fatigued, and mental fatigue can be caused by a whole variety of everyday activities, not sleeping well, having demands at work, having demands for caring, a whole variety of demands. And what mental fatigue seems to do is it undermines performance, makes your exercise performance worse than you would expect. And as a result of this large body of literature, it doesn't always happen, but more often than not, that's what we find. So the research has shown fairly convincingly that mental fatigue can impair exercise performance. And it doesn't always happen, but it happens, most of the time. And so then the question becomes, what are you going to do about it? And a number of groups around the world have come up with various countermeasures. And these things include, obviously, simple things like adding rests and having breaks, getting up and walking around, I guess, is one. And so these are fairly commonplace and fairly well developed countermeasures. The only problem with them is that I'm not sure how long-lived they are and whether they will be able to support you in the long term. So what we have been doing for the last, when did we first start? 2016 was our first study. Inspired by the work of Professor Samuel Marcora, now at the University of Bologna, we started evaluating the benefits of brain endurance training. And what brain endurance training is it combines normal physical training with additional cognitive training. And the initial idea behind it was, if you can make the training a little bit harder, then you're going to get more adaptations, brain adaptations, physical adaptations. And therefore, after doing this form of combination, cognitive plus physical training, you'll be able to perform better. And we've done a whole series of studies now in athletes, very very high level athletes, initially just looking at exercise performance and sports performance. And again, more often than not, brain endurance training can benefit the athletes. And almost by accident, along the way, we would occasionally put in some measures of cognitive function as our outcomes. And we only did it in a few studies. And as I said, it was really quite accidental. And what these studies showed, these sort of only, I think it was 3 studies showed, was that the brain endurance training, which was designed to sort of help athletes to become, better athletes, perform better, was also improving their cognitive performance. And so we thought about this, and I started a collaboration with Dr. Jesus and his supervisor Thomas at the University of Extremadura in Spain, and they were also interested in this topic of mental fatigue and performance, again mainly in sport. And then one day I was talking with Jesus, and we said, well, maybe we can do a little bit more and extend this to other groups. And it just so happens that Jesus is also a paddle tennis coach, and he was giving some paddle lessons in his village, his local community in Extremadura. Well, yeah, in the area around Extremadura actually. And it just so happened that one of the people in his group was the local mayor, and she started asking, so Jesus, what do you do for a living? And so he started explaining to her what he was up to, and she said, well, is there anything that you can do for our local community? And they live in a small village, let me get this right, Torre de Miguel Ses Mero in Spain. And so Jesus and Thomas and myself sort of put our heads together and thought, well, what can we do to apply these principles of brain endurance training to a non-sporting, a non sort of young, active, athletic group? And so we set about this project, and that's how it was born. It was born from sort of almost like a chance conversation, giving a lesson, a paddle tennis lesson, to the mayor of a little village, and that's how the study was born. And then, with her support and the support of the local community, we recruited some older ladies, sort of 65 years and above, to this. It was a 12-week study in all. So we did some tests, assessed people beforehand, assessed them halfway through the 8-week intervention, and then assessed them at the end of the 8-week intervention. And then there was a sort of a washout period for 4 weeks where they didn't get any training at all. And then we reassessed essentially at 12 weeks. And because we had noticed that brain endurance training was benefiting not only physical performance but also cognitive performance, we also included a few tests of cognition along with the physical tests. So the physical tests that we use are very very standard. There's for assessing fitness in older adults, and so we asked people to see how far they could walk in 6 minutes. We asked them to see how many times they could sit up and stand from a chair, and we asked them how many times they could do a bicep curl using a small weight in their hand. So those were the standard tests, and what we found was that the brain endurance training, which wasn't particularly sort of onerous really, it was before they did their physical training, which was a little bit of resistance exercise and a little bit of walking, 20 minutes, 25 minutes, 3 times a week. They did, as you say, we asked them to perform a cognitive task, 20-minute cognitive task, kind of to sort of activate them and prime them really for the upcoming exercise, resistance and endurance exercise that they were going to do. So that was the training, and those were the physical tests, and then we also added in a couple of cognitive tests. And the cognitive test we added was something called the psychomotor vigilance task, and what that is very simply you're shown a screen, and a stimulus like a little circle appears on the screen, and you're asked to press it as quickly as you can. So it's kind of like a speeded reaction time task, and they do that for a couple of minutes. And then the other task we did was we gave them something called the Stroop color word test, which is a bit of a strange task really, but what it does is it presents you a series of words of colors printed in different colored inks, and so it asks you to name the color of the ink and ignore reading out the word. And we've grown up since childhood reading, so you see a word and you read it, so the natural inclination is to read the word. But we're actually in this rather confusing task by Dr. Ridley Stroop. We asked participants not to read the word, but instead to name the color. And this assesses a classic cognitive function, and one of the so-called executive functions, one of the higher order functions that we call inhibition. And inhibition is around in our everyday lives. So we assess inhibition, and then we also assess, with the earlier task, the psychomotor vigilance, we assess attention. And what we find is that when we test people, before the training, halfway through the training, and at the end of the training, that the group who did the brain endurance training, this combination of cognitive plus physical training, they do better than there's two comparison groups. There's a group who just do physical training for 8 weeks, and then there's a no training control group who just remain sedentary for 8 weeks. And on most of the tasks, not all of the tasks, and on most of the occasions, but not all of the occasions, we find that the brain endurance training group outperform the other groups. And so we were very surprised and not very surprised, we were very pleased that it was really a pilot study, to be honest. I mean, if you look at, if a methodologist would get to this study, they would say, well, there's not enough people, and fair enough, there's not a lot of people in the study. There's only 8 ladies per group, but it's a start for us, and the findings are very supportive of this idea that if you get people to engage and add a little bit of cognitive activity, cognitive training to their standard physical training, that you can get even better benefits. You get benefits both for their physical performance and also for their cognitive performance. So that's the study in a nutshell, and happy to.
That's great. So are you going to go back and do it again with a larger cohort?
We have to do that, yes. We're trying to get some funding at the moment to extend this. These studies, they're not easy to run. They need on a big scale, they need some funding, because you have to do lots of testing. There's the training involved. There's lots of training involved in this. Like, this study was 8 weeks of training 3 times a week. So that's already sort of 24 sessions, and then there's some testing sessions and what have you. So you're looking at lots of personnel hours to do the training. So that's what we want to do, and as I said, we're excited. There's been some publicity around the study, and so we hope I hope to get some funding for Jesus to be able to carry. He's just finished his PhD recently. He's currently a postdoc in Italy, and he's trying to get fellowships to continue with this work, which I think is, this study, I mean, it's not unique in that there are some studies coming up now um, looking at the benefits of combining cognitive plus physical training. The only difference I would say with brain endurance training as a form of combined training is that it's a little bit more formalized. So there are some studies that look at, for example, residents in care homes where they get them to do crosswords and sudokus and puzzles like that, as well as a little bit of physical training. But what we did was it's a little bit more formalized. So we take these with BET, we take classic cognitive tasks from the sort of the neuropsychological literature, and we get people to perform these. And the advantage of doing that is that you can standardize the task, you can tailor the task, you know what sort of cognitive load that you're giving people. Whereas these other studies, I mean, they're probably more practical, to be honest, in that they're done in a setting of a care home or a residence, but they don't really involve performing I mean, the tasks that we get people to perform typically are they can perform them on an iPhone, an iPad, or on a computer. So they're just a little bit more demanding. I think the cognitive load is a little bit higher than, for example, doing a Sudoku or trying to solve those sorts of puzzles.
Fascinating. So if I want to do this, if I want to train my brain before I go to work out, where do I turn to get a high enough level brain workout to make a difference?
Yes,
where
do
you advise people go?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of apps available from your choice of app store, and some of them are free, some of them cost not very much. I mean, we use an app called Soma MPT, but that's designed for use. Has been designed for use by athletes and sort of the military personnel use it, and it's rather expensive just for regular people to use. So I'm not sure if that's
you spell SOMA?
SOMA and NPT.
Okay.
Yeah. As I said, it's a bit expensive, that one. So, but there are plenty of
I
other.
looked into it. Yeah.
There are.
It is a bit expensive. I saw you use that in your study, and I went, ooh, I mean, it's a little high.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the reason that we started using it was that when the pandemic arrived, all the labs were closed at the university, and probably worldwide they were closed. And so we were doing studies originally using other pieces of software. But when the pandemic came, we realized that we couldn't it wasn't business as usual. We wanted to carry on doing some research, and the students still had to get their degrees. So we looked around, and we started a conversation with Grant Hayes, who's the CEO of Soma Technologies, who produces Soma. And that was the start of a collaboration. So he gives us the app for free for doing research, but I mean, his income stream comes from athletes and coaches and the military and racing drivers and what have you, who don't blink at paying a little bit of money. But for most people, it's a little bit steep. But there are, as I said, there are plenty of cognitive tasks available on the App Store for very little money or even for free. They're just not particularly standardized. So any of those, I think, would work perfectly well. And in fact,
do some names come to mind, Chris?
Not offhand. As I said, if you type in for any of the classic cognitive tasks, and I can give you a list of the classic cognitive tasks. But for example, something from the PVT, for example, that one's there. The Stroop task you can get, the two-back memory task. There's a whole range of different cognitive tasks. In our studies now, we tend to use tasks from the sort of executive function battery. So we use tasks that look at inhibition, things like the Stroop task. We look at memory updating, things like the two-back memory task. And then
What's a two-back memory test? What's that?
The two-back is okay.
Sorry, I don't know what that
No,
is.
that's fine. Why would you? You wouldn't expect to. But what that is it presents you a series of stimuli. Let's say numbers, and what you have to do is you have to um, keep track of the numbers you've been presented with, and you have to say whether the current number is a match with the number that was presented on the screen, sort of two screens before.
Two back. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
And in fact, you can change the difficulty of the task by changing the size of the n in the n back. So the simplest one is the one back. You just have to say whether the current stimulus is the same as the one previous. But you can also make it harder by saying, is the current stimulus the one that you saw three screens back? So you can change the sort of the cognitive load, how much you have to remember. You have to retain this information in memory and keep a kind of like a running track of it. I personally find the three back a little bit too challenging. So
I was just thinking that sounds real hard.
it is hard. I don't do the three back gives me a bit of a headache, I think, but the two back I can manage, and the one back I can also manage. So that's one, and then there are some also some task switching where you're doing one task, and then either the rules of the task change or the actual task changes, and you have to now do a second task. So these three aspects: inhibition, switching, inhibition, updating, and switching, are core psychological, cognitive operations, frontal cognitive operations, and they're involved in most purposeful activities and behaviors that we do as humans. They're also involved in exercise regulation, and hence that's why we think that there's this link between doing brain endurance training with these sorts of tasks and causing adaptations by combining them with exercise. So the cognitive loading plus the physical demands of exercise, we believe, create greater adaptations, and we think that this adaptation process, which is better with the combined training, allows people to then perform better at both subsequent tests of physical function, but also of cognitive function. So basically, you kind of push the system to perform better.
And you're doing 20 minutes of the brain.
Okay. Well,
and then how much are you doing of each?
Okay, so the brain endurance training is flexible, and in that particular study with the older ladies, we decided that we would keep it quite simple, and we would give the 20 minutes of cognitive task, and then like about 45 minutes of exercise, and do that 3 times a week. But what we have is we have a whole variety of options for doing and integrating the combination of cognitive task and physical task. So, for example, the brain endurance training studies that we do in the context of resistance or weight training, what we do there is we have somebody do short cognitive tasks. Then they'll do like an exercise set. They'll do so many reps. Then they'll do another little cognitive task, and then they'll do another set, and then they'll do another short cognitive task. So we essentially, with that, we integrate. When we call, so the one with the older adults, we call that prior brain endurance training, because the cognitive task comes before. The one I've just described to you with the sets of exercise, and then and kind of like the sets of cognitive tasks, we call that intermixed brain endurance training, because it interleaves or intermixes the two types of tasks. And the great advantage of that is that people would be having a little rest anyway between exercise sets.
You have to.
Yeah, you have to. And then this is you just add a little bit of a cognitive task for 3 minutes before you get going again. So it doesn't add too much to your overall training session, which is obviously more advantageous for people who are a bit sort of time poor. And people can complain, oh, I don't want to be adding loads and loads of extra time with the cognitive training. And we say, well, you would be sitting around resting. So while you're resting your body, you can be, still, putting demands on your brain. And
everybody at the gym, they get on their phones in between, like they do a rep and then they get on their phones and look at their email.
Yes,
so now you might as well be doing brain training instead of just email.
Yes. Well, interestingly,
have the same results.
There is some literature suggesting that going on your phone and doing social media is a form of cognitive loading. It's just not very standardized, but that is I guess a form of brain endurance training where you're on your phone looking at social media, scrolling and checking things out, and then you do your set, and then you, as you say, while you're waiting, you do a little bit more. So I don't know how I don't know if that's beneficial compared to the sort of tasks, cognitive tasks that we typically use, but it's definitely worth trying out, because if it creates a cognitive load, then in principle it should create this benefit.
So are you seeing the intermittent has the same cognitive benefits as doing the preloading?
Yeah, well, we've never formally compared the different forms of exercise, of brain endurance training, but that we get the same sort of changes, and what we, most of our studies now, we prefer to do the intermixed brain endurance training because it's just a little bit more flexible. So we, for example, what we might do is give people let's say a 10-minute cognitive task before they start anything, and then after they complete each set of exercises at the gym, we then ask them to do another 3-minute task or a 5-minute task or something, and then they do exercise. And that sort of integration seems to be quite well received by people. They're quite happy to do that.
So when you go to the gym, that's what you're doing. You're doing that intermittent.
Well, my form of exercise pleasure, I like to ride a bicycle. So when I ride my bicycle, that's what I do. I don't, much to my wife's disappointment, I don't currently go to the gym to do resistance, but we have got a weight room, and so it's one of my 2025 resolutions is to, because as we know, there's lots of benefits for doing resistance, and I'm getting on a little bit these days, and so as well as doing my cycling and my swimming, I've decided I'm going to add a bit of resistance work as well. So
good for you.
Yeah, thank you.
So then before you bike and swim, you're doing your preloading. You're doing cognitive work before those things.
Well, I am.
Have you adopted this yourself, Chris?
Well, as an academic, I'm doing this sort of thing all the time anyway. The sorts of cognitive tasks that people, that's what it's sort of, that there's kind of like naturalistic ways of creating mental fatigue. So if you're engaged in cognitive work, which engages me for most of my work, then at the end of the day, people are mentally and as well as being physically tired. So you could argue that you'll get better training benefits if you then go and work out at the end of the day when you've had a hard day's work behind you than if you exercise when you're feeling fresh and sparkly early in the morning. I haven't actually compared that, but that's what I would predict. So it might be better to actually wait till life sort of wears you down a little bit and tires you out before you go to the gym or go for your bike ride, which is what I typically do. Yes.
That's great. I can't think of anything else. You've explained this so well. Thank you. We have in this country something called Brain HQ that is, you have to pay for it. So I'll also go looking for free things. But Brain HQ seems to have a lot of these components. Have you worked with that software?
I'm not familiar with that software, actually.
Okay.
There are lots of people working in this space, and I think there's lots of providers available. I think this idea of the cognitive training is a very popular one, and I think the latest idea now is say, okay, let's just combine it. I mean, it seems a very unnatural thing to do, to just say, oh, I'm just going to do cognitive training, or I'm just going to do physical training. We were designed, we would have, you know, from when we were kids, we would do everything. You would run and play and do it. And so it seems strange,
for hours.
When you become adult, you now start to compartmentalize these demands. And so I think this idea of combination training is getting a lot of traction. And I hope over the next few years people will try it out and see where it works and when it doesn't work, and what's the best way that it can work and fit around people's schedules and what have you. So I think it's the years ahead are very promising for all of us.
Well, I'm really glad that your colleague stumbled on this with the mayor of his small town.
Yes.
and had the skills and knew you, and you guys could put together a study. It's very exciting. Thank you.
No, thank you for inviting me. It's been very, very good to be able to sort of share with you and your listeners.
Oh, you're welcome.
You've been listening to the Cutting Edge Health Preventing Cognitive Decline podcast. Any information shared here is for educational purposes only. Guest opinions are their own. This podcast is not responsible for the veracity of their statements. Do not use any of this information without first talking to your doctor. Cutting Edge Health, LLC, is not responsible for what may happen to you if you use their information in place of official advice from a medical professional. Thanks for listening. Be well.